I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
While their homeland still has a long way to go, Haitians here in New York are having a tough time of their own.
It is hard to not know what will happen to you in a few days or next month.
June is the month for tying the knot, but what about untying it? An expert joins us to explain annulments.
The confusion sometimes comes with the idea that it's a Catholic divorce, but it's very different from a divorce.
And could flowers help answer a centuries-old question? Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. When the massive earthquake rocked Haiti in January, it also jolted that country's political future. But today, one question was finally answered.
Haiti's current president has announced November 28th as the day voters will decide who succeeds him. Elections in the predominantly Catholic country had been scheduled for February and March, but they were pushed back because of the earthquake. Meanwhile, the aftershocks are continuing to be felt here in New York. Some Haitians who relocated here after the quake are facing new challenges every day and new obstacles to rebuilding their lives, as we hear now from producer Ingrid Rojas.
Andre Jolicoeur is on his way to the Elmont Public Library, or to his office, as he likes to call it.
May I have that book, please? Thank you very much.
Ever since he arrived in Queens after the Haitian earthquake, he uses this library as his home base. And these days, home is an elusive concept for Andre, as he has been without a home since the earthquake.
We were on the street like everybody, living in a tent city, instantly. Instantly, we were living in a tent city. We had no house.
Andre, a physician specializing in public health, lived in Port-au-Prince with his wife and 11-year-old daughter. 5 days after the earthquake, he and his daughter, a U.S.-born citizen, were airlifted to Orlando. They later arrived at a family friend's house in Elmont, Queens, which has been hosting them since.
Unfortunately, it was not possible to evacuate her with both parents. So I came here with her. My wife stayed 2 or 3 more days before being evacuated over to Canada.
And the family separation is just one of their problems. Andre arrived in the U.S. on a tourist visa, which means that he can't legally work. And to make matters worse, his visa is about to expire.
We face a lot of challenges. First, the situation of being without a work permit, not being able to work and provide for ourselves, dependency, uncertainty about the future. It is hard to not know what will happen to you in a few days or next month.
And Andre is hardly alone in this situation. Like him, there are thousands of Haitians who have arrived on tourist visas. For many, it was a quick way out of a devastated Haiti, but it has evolved into a whole new set of problems.
You find yourself in limbo. You have a tourist visa and you cannot convert it to anything that you want.
Okay, Andre, do me a favor. Sign and pass it down, please.
Every Friday, Andre attends a support group for earthquake survivors run by Catholic charities. Today's lesson is subway survival. Since the group started back in February, about 80 people have come seeking their services.
Of the people who come to the support group, their circumstances are dire. Primarily, they're coming and they're staying with friends or families, but after a very short period of time, the honeymoon is over, and they have to find alternate living arrangements. They're all coming in as visitors, which means they're not allowed to work. So if they're not authorized to work, they have no means of supporting themselves. Some who have American-born children are entitled to WIC, food stamps, public assistance. But if you're a single individual and you have no children, you basically have no means of financial support.
And unlike Haitians who were in the U.S. before January 12th and got temporary protected status, this group of people who were directly impacted by the earthquake is hardly getting any aid.
This population is definitely vulnerable to kind of slipping through the cracks.
Krista Stewart is the manager of the Newcomer Transition Unit working on site at New York's Haitian Earthquake Family Resource Center at the Bedford Armory. Since the center opened in February, they have seen an increase in Haitians arriving on tourist visas.
You know, a lot of attention, of course, and rightfully so, is paid right to Haiti, where there needs to be infrastructure developed, as well as the population here that's also helping to support them and that needed to come out of the shadows. However, this group really does remain very vulnerable.
No doubt the situation is difficult for Andre and others like him. But thanks to the support group, he's been able to not only share experiences with others in the same situation, but he's also been able to walk away with groceries, clothing, and a full belly. Despite all he's been through, Andre is thankful for all the help he's received. However, charity only goes so far.
Do I think that the American government has done something for me? There is no question about it. We are fortunate, and we are fortunate because we were airlifted by the American military from Haiti. But I think there were something also to be done for people who came after the earthquake and who find themselves in a situation where there is no way forward, there is no way backward. And something should be contemplated for those people as well.
Well, we do have much more about the situation in Haiti and ways that you can help on our website. Just head to currentsny.net.
But stay tuned, there is much more Currents coming up straight ahead. When we return, we'll have the day's headlines, including an historic move from the Vatican with some big news for a North American cardinal.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, you've seen the face, but did you pay attention to the flowers? We'll have a bit of a different look at the Shroud of Turin.
But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. A prominent Canadian cardinal is Pope Benedict's choice to lead the Congregation for Bishops. As we hear from Rome Reports, this is the first time a Canadian has been appointed head of a Roman congregation.
After several months of speculation, Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re has resigned from his position as head of the Congregation for Bishops. His successor will be the church's top official in Canada, Cardinal Marc Ouellet. He is the Archbishop of Quebec and the Roman Catholic Primate of Canada. This assignment is significant because the congregation selects bishops for most of the dioceses around the world. Cardinal Ouellet spent most of his priestly career as professor and rector in seminaries. He served as secretary of the Council for Promoting Christian Unity and became the Archbishop of Quebec in 2002. He also served with Benedict XVI on the editorial board of the Communio, an international theological journal. He is fluent in 6 languages.
The Italian government went to court today to try and keep crucifixes in public classrooms. The European Court of Human Rights sided last year with a mother who said her children should have the right to a secular education. Italy later appealed that case. Reports say a government lawyer called the crucifix secular and said it was a passive symbol with no relation to teaching. Greece, Russia, and 10 other countries joined the case as third-party supporters of Italy. More than 90% of Italians call themselves Christian. Last week, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer came under fire for saying most illegal immigrants in her state were smuggling drugs. Critics said Brewer had no hard evidence that statement was true. Nevertheless, drug trafficking is a problem along the U.S.-Mexico border, and a Mexican archbishop took on the topic this week. Archbishop Felipe Aguirre Franco of Acapulco said all Mexicans should be involved in the fight against drugs. He also called on drug traffickers to repent and turn away from their illegal and immoral activities because, quote, God is always willing to forgive you.
A bankruptcy judge in Delaware ruled this week that a group of alleged clergy sex abuse victims would be allowed to seek money from parishes in addition to the Diocese of Wilmington. The diocese declared bankruptcy last year and has $45 million in assets. The parishes are separate nonprofit entities, but the judge ruled that another $120 million held in trust by the diocese on behalf of those parishes was actually commingled with other money and could not be traced. Well, a Senate committee last week voted to lift the ban on elective abortions at military hospitals. Now the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is speaking out against that move, urging senators to drop the provision from the defense authorization bill before it comes up for a vote by the full Senate. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, chairman of the Bishops' Committee on Pro-Life Activities, said in a statement that taxpayer dollars should not be used to subsidize elective abortions. The ban on such procedures at military hospitals was enacted back in 1995. Well, in the Gulf of Mexico, Hurricane Alex is churning its way toward the coast of Texas. While the storm did not directly hit the area affected by the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill, waves as high as 12 feet are hampering cleanup efforts. Meantime, residents along the Texas coast, including some churchgoers you're about to meet, are preparing for Alex to hit. Courtney Zabowski has the story.
At Island Baptist Church on South Padre Island, they're doing what they always do to prepare for Alex.
Well, of course, we're praying.
They're also boarding up windows and doors.
So we're just preparing, doing the sandbags, making sure everything is safe inside, and then we're going to, go our separate ways and fix our own houses.
This is one of the busiest weekends of the year for the island, the July 4th holiday. Some tourists here have asked for their money back. Others aren't showing up, canceling their trips altogether. Even if the island doesn't take a direct hit, people here say the damage has been done.
We're seasonal here, and if we lose big weekends like this, it's tough. We've done it before.
Homeowners here went through a hurricane 2 years ago, Dolly. Lessons were learned.
Last time we didn't board up when Dolly came through, we got away with it. The Exxon sign landed on our front porch. Missed our windows by about 8 inches. So this year we're going to board up.
The next several hours will be critical for some. They'll make the decision whether to stay or to go.
That is Courtney Zabowski reporting from South Padre Island, Texas.
Stay tuned. There's more currents coming up. When we return, we'll hear from an expert on an often misunderstood part of the church, annulments.
Since an annulment declares the invalidity of a marriage from the beginning, it means there really was no marriage.
Welcome back. Well, this week, as the month of weddings comes to a close, and that's sure hard to believe, the U.S. bishops launched a new initiative called Marriage, Unique for a Reason. It includes videos designed to promote the sacrament, but as we all know, not every married couple ends up living happily ever after.
This is true, and for some Catholics, divorce becomes an unfortunate fact of life. But there is something else involved that a lot of people in the pews may not understand very well: annulments. Here to explain is our Natalia Ortiz.
Thank you. It's no secret divorces are through the roof, and most people know the Catholic Church frowns upon ending marriage. But the Church does grant annulments depending on the circumstances. So does this make annulments Catholic divorce? I sat with Monsignor Stephen Aguja from the Diocesan Tribunal. He gave us the Church's official stance on untying the knot.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Monsignor Aguja.
Thank you.
So first tell us, what is an annulment?
An annulment is basically a declaration by the church, by the tribunal of a diocese, that a particular marriage is invalid. It was invalid from the start. The confusion sometimes comes with the idea that it's a Catholic divorce. Right. But it's very different from a divorce, because since an annulment declares the invalidity of a marriage from the beginning, it means there really was no marriage. Whereas a divorce is not denying that there was a marriage. There was legally a marriage, at least civilly, and a divorce kind of separates the people.
Okay, so what are some of the scenarios that you encounter, or who would be interested in getting an annulment, I guess is the question?
Well, very often Catholic people who have been involved in failed marriages try to put their lives back together. And that's the ministry of the tribunal, really, to help them do that. So when they come to the tribunal, they often are trying to put a part of their life that might not have been so happy behind them. And we try to minister to them so that they can get their lives back on track and be reconciled with the church.
So what are some grounds for an annulment and what are not?
There are many different grounds for an annulment, and those grounds are discovered when we begin to talk to people and try to explore some of the situations of their marriage and before their marriage. There are psychological grounds and many others as well, and those things do come out in the conversation with people.
So for example, I mean, are there any hard and fast rules? For example, is infidelity grounds for divorce? I mean, excuse me, for an annulment.
Infidelity in and of itself would not be grounds for an annulment, but it might indicate that a person who was unfaithful in marriage did not have a good or a Christian concept of what being faithful meant. So it might be a good indication for the advocate to explore something like that in the person's past. But in and of itself, something like infidelity is really maybe an opportunity for reconciliation and forgiveness, but not grounds for an annulment.
I see. So I also think a lot of people have the perception that the Catholic Church expects everyone to stay in their marriage no matter what. And what about people who are involved in abusive relationships, or again infidelity, or things like that are in a divorce considered legitimate reasons to separate?
Right. Those things, like I said, are indications that there might be something in the marriage that made it invalid from the start, because certainly those things do not indicate a couple's really desire or ability to live the Christian calling to marriage that we expect or that we hope for them. And so the church certainly doesn't want anyone to be in abusive relationships or anything like that.
So they are open to, I guess, looking at that, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It's not, because I think that's the perception that people have, is that the church is just very hard and fast. You got married and you're done and that's it.
No, we presume the validity of a marriage until it's proved otherwise.
Okay.
And we do hope that couples try to work through problems. And those problems are not the grounds for an annulment, but as I said, they might indicate something deeper.
So what about the children of marriages that become annulled? A lot of, the rumor, of course, or the myth is that these children are considered illegitimate by the Catholic Church. What do you have to say about this?
It's just not true.
Okay.
An annulment does not nullify a relationship, first of all.
Okay.
And children are born of a relationship. Whether or not we decide a marriage was null in the church does not mean that there was no marriage civilly. There certainly was a civil marriage. That marriage is ended by divorce. Because we don't accept the divorce, we might have to go through an annulment process. But since there was a civil marriage, and no one can deny that, those children were born of a legitimate civil marriage.
Pope Benedict has said that he feels sometimes annulments have been granted too easily. What is your response to that?
Well, I think in general we live in a society that is a kind of a divorce mentality. People are a little bit easily giving up on their marriages. And when that happens, more of those marriages come to the tribunal for us to examine. So I think it's a question that goes almost beyond the tribunal into how are we ministering to couples in marriage? What is our marriage ministry, and how are we helping couples to stay together?
Right, and also I'm assuming it helps to try to make sure that they're ready to get married so that they don't have to go through an annulment.
Exactly. Premarital counseling and direction is very, very, very important.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my
pleasure.
Your time. Thank you.
For more on annulments, visit currentsny.net and click on Riding the Wave.
Well, it's very interesting because there's that distinction there between the civil divorce and the annulment, and something that might be grounds for divorce might only be a symptom of a greater problem that would then possibly, if it's so ruled, an annulment in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, another thing I think people don't know is, and I found out in my research, is that the Catholic Church actually discourages people from getting married if they're only doing it because the woman is pregnant, which is something I think people didn't even know. And I think it all goes back to that idea that in that moment, you're supposed to be getting married for the right reasons. And so if you're not, that could lead to an annulment, and they don't want to have to do that. So.
Right.
Yeah, and as you're sort of indicating, there's a lot of counseling available about that. The pre-Cana and the Marriage Encounter, I know, is a group that I had done a story with. It's unfortunate, though, that I think that people can't really do that unless they're in the relationship.
Yeah.
Can't you just elect to do pre-Cana on your own and sort of learn about how to do relationships
And do you have
properly?
to be engaged to have to do pre-Cana? I don't know. That's another great question to ask. Maybe we'll do something
because
about
that might, again, help not just so much put the emphasis on the person, on the other person, I mean, but really on you as the individual and readying yourself in that way that you need to have for a relationship to make then a proper marriage that would not need to lead to an invalidation or an annulment.
Make sure you know what it's all about before you get involved in it.
Yes, that's right. I think it all goes back to just being ready at that moment and making sure. So.
Right, absolutely. Well, Natalia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Just ahead, some scientists are taking a different approach to authenticate the Shroud of Turin.
The Shroud of Turin made headlines this spring when it was put on display for the first time in a decade. A lot of the attention focused on the image in the shroud and the carbon dating and efforts to determine its authenticity.
But at least one scientist has taken time to look at another detail, and it's one that many of us might have missed. It's the plants of the shroud. And tonight, H2O News gives us a closer look.
After the extraordinary exposition of the Shroud of Turin, interest in this precious relic has not decreased. In Jerusalem in particular, where the events marked by the Shroud took place, this interest has been kept alive by a permanent exhibit housed at the Notre Dame Center and by various meetings and conferences connected to it. Recently, Professor Avinoam Danin, botany expert at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, publicized the findings of his studies on specific traces of pollen found on the shroud.
It's not built like...
As the author of Botany of the Shroud, History of Floral Images on the Shroud of Turin, he explains that hundreds of plant images are imprinted on the fabric of the shroud. These images help to determine where and when those flowers were placed on the cloth. Danin particularly focused his attention on three plants: the Zygophyllum dumosum, a desert plant found mainly in Israel, Sinai, and Jordan, the Cistus creticus, and the Gundul tourneforti. And he concluded that the area where the three fresh plants chosen as indicators could be collected and placed on the shroud next to the body of a crucified man can only be one place in the world, that of the area between Jerusalem and Hebron. As for the flowering time, he notes that March and April are the months of the year when dozens of the plants identified on the shroud are flowering. The research that Professor Danin put forth demonstrated that it was those fresh flowers that bloom and live only in these places that were placed on the shroud, and confirmed the specific use of that time and area for the custom of placing flowers on the bodies of the dead.
It's so interesting that you can use the flowers to sort of place literally geographically where something is and when it might have been in the calendar year.
Yeah, and talk about something that's overlooked when you think about the shroud. I mean, you think, of course, about the image in the shroud, the face that you see there, and the rest of the image of the body that you see there. But flowers, I didn't even know that they were there at all.
Botany of the shroud. Well, it sort of, I guess, goes with the tradition of placing flowers next to a deceased person. But it's interesting that there's a whole study of it, the botany of the shroud, in addition to, like you said, the carbon dating and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a science that you didn't even know was applicable in this case, but it is. It's kind of cool. Well, that is it for tonight. Now, remember, you can always watch us online. We're over at currentsny.net on the World Wide Web. Check us out on Facebook as well. Until next time, I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great night.